Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this panel. It's a real pleasure to be here. The panel, of course, how Bolsonaro's hate cabinet works, but we're going to talk about a lot more than Brazil. We're going to really widen out the conversation to see how some of the lessons that perhaps are being learned in Brazil could be applied elsewhere. So let me introduce my guests, because I'm very happy to have them both here. So Patricia Campos Mello, who's a reporter for Folha de Sao Paulo, which is a leading newspaper in Brazil. Also a research scholar at Columbia University, working on electoral disinformation, and that very much the focus of a lot of your work, including a book called The Machine of Hate, where you focus on fake news and, crucially, digital violence, and also won several awards, too many to list, but I think the one that catches the eye is the International Press Freedom Award from the CPJ, of course, the Committee to Protect Journalists. And Daniela Pinheiro, journalist and editor, broke the glass ceiling in Brazil in becoming the first woman to edit News and Current Affairs weekly magazine. So first woman editor-in-chief, three times winner of Brazilian journalism's most prestigious award, and has been a fellow both at Stanford and the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism. Now, we're all here for the International Journalism Festival, and the word courage comes up a lot when we talk about journalism. So, for example, now we're all following many of our colleagues who are reporting from Ukraine and the obvious risks that are involved in that. There's several journalists here in Perugia who live their lives under police protection because of threats either from the extreme right or from organized crime. But what is particular about Patricia and Daniela, brave or fascist so that is, we will discuss later on, and we'll see how that has affected their work, and their lives as well. So thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with the title of this panel, How Bolsonaro's Hate Cabinet Works. And Patricia, I'm just going to start with you. So obviously you both have stories, but first of all, just explain it to us, because it sounds to be here. Basically, the cabinet of, or the Office of Hate is a taxpayer-funded disinformation. Aides, consultants, or actually communications directors directly linked to the President of Brazil, whose main role is things we've said online on our social media years
ago, 25 years ago, going to our personal pages. I remember when I was editing the magazine, and one of the reasons I afraid and I resigned and left the country, I put my trying to 8 years old, and it happened many times. The reporters giving them the addresses, their addresses, and details about their families. But the particularity of this hate cabinet is because one of the leaders of this movement, we can say that, is one of Bolsonaro's sons. So this guy, he's a mastermind in digital strategy. In the dark side of the mastermind, condition. But the problem is we can't respond to these attacks in the same way. Because there are lots of robots. We know how they work, and they are funded by Bolsonaro.
Really out of control WhatsApp and Telegram. WhatsApp and Telegram is like hell. And we have to think that in Brazil, I mean, everybody has WhatsApp. Brazil is the second largest market for WhatsApp. So information, internet equals WhatsApp. And for many people, if I got this information saying that XYZ is a communist or whatever, offers sex in exchange for information, of course I believe it.
And of course the difference is between Twitter, Facebook, and WhatsApp, that WhatsApp it's not public. I mean, Twitter, and in a way that's also one of the negatives and is harmful, but at least you kind of know what's out there. And Daniela, you said something that when they posted your daughter's picture, you said they posted. Again, I know this sounds like a detail, but how do you know it was they? Was it a semi-official account? Was it a person you could trace? Or is it like a fake account, but that you know you can trace back?
First, the first characteristic is because the same posts were replicated many times with the same text, the same image. And when we get into the account, this account has like 1 follower or 0 followers, so they are definitely robots. So it was made by someone or by a group of people with an intention. An intention, it's undermine my position, my work as a journalist. But for example, I have another case which was a reporter that I was working with me, and I assigned him reporting about the ideological guru of Bolsonaro, who was always a teacher, a coach. And the guy attended, it's another story, not my stories, but another guy who attended his classes, and he wrote about what the ideological guru, Bolsonaro's guru, says during their classes, his classes. And then this guy, the Bolsonaro guru, posts in his account the picture of the reporter's house with the address, and with a very short message, like, okay, he lives there, something like this.
With the address.
So, what do? The first thing you do is you go to the legal department no, the first thing you do is to get the phone call from the reporter. What? What should I do?
I mean, it's terrifying. It's called
terrifying.
doxing.
The guy has
it's
2 kids, so it's what should I do now? So, and when you get into the legal department, you realize nobody knows what to do. Companies, media companies are not
Can I just stop you for a question? Because I'm guessing it's different in various countries. Is it illegal in Brazil to publish someone's address? Because I think in the UK it would be, I have to double check, but you can't just publish pictures of children, for example. What's the law like in Brazil?
You can publish because there's not a threat.
Public information.
It was not a threat. And he was smart when he posted it, because he lives here. This is the only thing. So, but the thing is, my point is why I'm saying that they are not prepared, the legal departments and the newsrooms in general, because they should be prepared before something happened, in advance, a priori, not in posteriori. Right? So, of course, it's not a crime, but if we know these people work that way, we should, for example, push the Congress to change the law, to protect us, and journalists and artists and everyone who felt like threatened by this machine of hate.
And we will definitely focus on that more, because I think that's the key point. You know, we all know that there's an issue now. You've lived it on your own skins, and it's how we improve it, not just Brazil, but everywhere. If I can, just before that, though, I guess ask you about your personal experiences, because, you know, we spoke yesterday, and, you know, they're horrific, they're shocking, they must have shaken you, they must continue to shake you. So, Patricia, if I can just start with you, because you've really borne the brunt of a lot of this intimidation and digital aggression. So talk us through just a little bit of some of your experiences.
Sure. Well, I'm not a political reporter. I was not, you know, covering politics. I used to cover refugees and wars. So I was kind of used to challenging situations. But when I started covering disinformation in Brazil, I just realized that women are targets. And this is, I mean, when I first started publishing the stories back in 2018, the first thing that happened was, like, in 5 minutes, there was this, like, all kinds of fake news. People who were not me, they were saying, oh, so this is her, and she's been sentenced to XYZ. Then they got all my public information, and, you know, she's going to be at this place, and started distributing in WhatsApp groups, telling people to go there and confront me. So I couldn't get out of my house. Then they started calling my phone and saying, you're a communist whore, I'm going to beat you up. Then you had things like, because you had all these lies circulating, you had, like, my neighbor, next building, every time I would be on the street, she would open the window and scream, you're a communist whore. And I'm thinking, what? This is like a person who lives right here, right? So this was the first step of it. And of course, then, I mean, I had to go to police, and we had to get security because they identified my son, and my son was 6. And so they were sending messages saying, you know, you better leave the country with your 6-year-old son, because that's not a threat, that's a warning. So this was the first part. And then the second part was the sexual stuff, which is something I guess we all live, and they're never going to say, you're reporting sex, or this is a bad story. No, they're going to say, you know, you offer sex, or you're old, or you're fat, or you're ugly, or something like that, right? Or just threaten your family.
Shaming, trying to shame you.
Exactly. So, and when the president of the country says that on live TV, which is basically what happened, Bolsonaro and his son, actually his son went on the Congress floor, and he said, so this lady, Patricia Campos Mello, she's offering sex in exchange for damaging information about my father. And then he did that, and he went on, you know, to do a video about this, and because there was, I mean, I did so many stories about this, but one of them was with a former employee from a marketing agency, and at some point he insinuated that I had, you know, been trying to seduce him or something. And when he did that, what did I do? The same minute, I published all the conversations we had, all the audio recordings, it was not off the record, pictured everything, which showed that none of that had happened, right? But that doesn't matter. Truth doesn't really matter, right? Because 2 minutes after he says that, President's son goes online and starts doing video saying this, and goes on the Congress floor saying this, and then the other sons of the president, and then the president himself gives an interview and makes a joke with a pun with my name, and anal sex. And that's on TV. So after this happens, it's like there's green light for everyone. So what happens is deep fake porn video, like all kinds of horrible memes. There's, well, I'll show you, memes with the Pope. I mean, all this graphic stuff. And this, it does not go away. I mean, I don't ever respond because I don't know, that's my personality, right? I mean, not sure if that's good or not, but it doesn't go away, and it gets like the messages, and you all should have got, I mean, I hope you did not, but many of us get those horrible messages. So it got to a point that I felt I had to sue the president so that he would stop saying that.
Thank you for sharing all of that, because obviously it's, you know, it's painful, and I have to say that the sort of fake porn, it goes without saying, of course it's obvious, it could happen to anyone for any reason. I mean, anyone can do this in their bedroom on a computer. I mean, it's so, and of course you can go around saying, of course it's fake, but it's still hurtful. So, you know, thank you for sharing all of that. Just one final point, because on this, because we were meant to have this discussion in 2020, and then of course COVID happened. And actually, a lot of time obviously has elapsed, and the whole COVID story, which of course you also both got it in the neck for because of what was happening in Brazil and Bolsonaro sort of ignoring COVID and pretending it was just going to go away. What has changed over the past 2 years? So has anything got better because there is more attention? So Rana Ayub, for example, the journalist from India that is also here, you know, I remember her telling me a very similar story 3 years ago. I'm just wondering, we know that Daniela told us that legally speaking, there's no change, but culturally speaking, do you get a sense that people are realizing that this is just another way to intimidate female journalists?
I think the women, the solidarity of the women at that time made a difference, because you had like all, not just journalists, but women, you know, saying, see, this is not acceptable. Like you can't do that, not because you're president or not because you have all these bots and Office of Hate and stuff. So that in turn puts pressure on internet platforms, because that's the only thing that works, public relations. That's the only thing they care about, right? Bottom line. So I guess they are at least trying to do something. I'm not sure. It's not really useful, because people, I mean, and I'm sure Daniela felt that too, when something like that happens, I mean, it's fine. We have to have criticism. It's important that, you know, our bosses are the readers, the viewers, so if something is wrong, but when something like that happens and you have like your picture and you know, fake stuff all over, it's like, have you ever, maybe something, I think some people dream that you wake up and you're like in the middle of the crowd and you're naked and everybody's looking at you and you're like, okay, so I'm never gonna leave my house again. That's the feeling, basically.
And because something similar, I mean, not just in India to Rana Ayub, but happens to other journalists, and of course there's always a cultural context, and it's horrible for any woman anywhere, but in some parts of the world the cultural context makes it so that it really is disastrous to your life and reputation in a way that's even worse to what would happen to us in sort of, you know, Western or South American countries. Daniela, you actually resigned from your job where you were the sort of groundbreaking first female editor. You did that in 2019. I mean, again, tell us your experiences as well, and what led to that decision to resign? Because, of course, you have to take care of yourself, but as editor-in-chief, like you mentioned before, your reporters as well.
Yeah. First, I would love to jump into the Patricia comment in two things about the reaction of women. I had many conversations with friends of mine, including you. I don't know if you remember in Abrage Congress at some point, because we started to banalize some words through, like whore, prostitute, I don't know, you know that, being raped, I know. And I heard so many times women journalists saying, "Oh no, they only call me a whore. It's okay. It's not a death threat." We can't banalize that. We can't banalize that because things start that way. You know, first they are calling us whore and it's okay. Then they are doing the warnings because this was Patricia said. I left the country, I resigned first because I had not only an issue with Bolsonaro because I published a story that they didn't like or they thought was outrageous for the family, but also because the media company that I used to work for at some point was trying to, you know, approach Bolsonaro's, and they forced me to publish an apologize note for the Bolsonaro family. And I said, no, I don't publish that because I did nothing wrong. This story was discussed in this newsroom during 3 months. Everyone here, executive editors, the directors, everyone knew that. And why should I do that? So I resigned along other 10 people. And one thing that happened. I felt a lack of solidarity among Pauls, my colleagues, not because I got many messages and direct messages and private emails, but not like publicly. And I understand because in Brazil, it's a country of 220 million people and we have like 3 major outlets to work. If you are, if you write, if you're a journalist, you're not a video or a TikTok influencer, so it's very restrict. The field you can act. So first, I felt absolutely alone. Second, the legal department response to this issue was absolutely. It was pointless for me, and then the warning. My kids, my daughter's picture, this idea of okay, I have the guts to move forward, to continue in this on this track, and then I felt that I couldn't, even because I was editor-in-chief. It's another position. And I think the message to the rest of the newsroom was terrible, because if one story implies in the resignation of the editor-in-chief, imagine if you decided to write something lighter or more lighter, like worse about the president. So 2 points about this. And another thing is when Patricia mentioned that's Bolsonaro and his minister's office, cabinet officers, is spreading this. A Reuters Institute has a very good research on when misinformation comes from the top. It's so hard to combat, to battle. So this is something that we should, try to understand better, because unfortunately, I don't think we are able to, combat this in a good way.
Because you comment, just another question to you, because you combat this sort of by contesting the misinformation, but just talk us through the panorama of media in Brazil. So how many people would read your publications, which are, highly respected and the most read in Brazil, but looking at the numbers, how many people read newspapers or get their information from magazines, the official TV stations, or social media? What's the balance there?
It's tiny. It's actually sad. The circulation of the main newspapers in Brazil, the 3 main newspapers together, should be like no more than 1.5 million.
Say that again?
1.5 million. The 3 main newspapers together for a population of 209 million. Whereas you have around 140 million WhatsApp users. getting their information, and I mean another 60 million Telegram users, getting the information from all this, also the junk news websites. I mean, they emulate news websites. You look at them, you're like, okay, so this is a legitimate, but it's actually government people behind it. So it's what Danny was saying, it's so hard to compete. We're trying to get the information out there, but it is tiny, right? And even the TV, you might know better. I mean, it's also losing a lot of audience.
Yeah, but look, this is interesting to point out. Like, hate cabinet attacked influencers, online influencers as well.
Yes.
So one of the most famous influencer in Brazil, his name is Felipe Neto. My daughter is there. She knows how many followers he has. How many? I think it's 8 million followers, right? I think
40.
Yes,
Yeah.
more or less like this. And young people get information about politics from him. And him in the past, like 2 years, he became a very political driven person, right? And talking a lot about the left and against Bolsonaro. And this guy was also targeted by the hate cabinet, saying that he was a pedophile. And other things.
Yeah, right after he did an interview for the New York Times, a video interview, he was being vocal about the authoritarianism rising in Brazil. Right after that, they basically made up fake conversations that he seemed to be a pedophile. And when you're saying these things go to the real world, he had in front of his house, of his condo, people yelling, you want to have sex with kids, you're against our families, and this is all artificially generated. It's like none of it is true.
Particularly terrifying, I guess, for someone who's a social media influencer, because there's apps. I mean, we had the conversation about how the legal department doesn't know what to do, but at least there kind of is a legal department. But for, I guess, freelance journalists or any online influencers, it would be terrifying. Now, Brazil has had, everyone's had a difficult time over the past few years, but like we mentioned earlier, COVID really hit Brazil. One could argue because the president was in slight denial for a long time. So that happened, and there was a lot of international focus. So certainly on the international channels, you would see that effectively the mass graves. And now there's an election coming up in a couple of months. So then how is all of that having an impact? Because I'm assuming that the hate cabinet will be going into overdrive now. Both of you.
During COVID, it was, we're talking about, it's just, they had a thing called Scoreboard of Life, the government. So they would only publish numbers of people who had survived COVID. So, for instance, if you are a person who only follows social account, government social media accounts and government, pro-government websites, and of course, if you're a government supporter, you think the main TV Globo is communist, all the newspapers are communist, so you don't read those. You think Brazil is wonderful. We're like the best country dealing with COVID. And people were dying and dying because the president was delaying to get vaccines and do all that, right? So when we all, I was reporting from public hospitals, we reporters, we were seeing people dying and there was no oxygen. People literally suffocated. And we would be viewed as vultures. Everything's so good, people are surviving.
That's the word that was actually used to describe by people linked to the government, right?
Yes. So why are you being such, vultures?
So pessimistic.
So pessimistic, right? See how many people are surviving. They even try to distort statistics from the Ministry of Health, and then the media outlets, we started getting our information, numbers, direct from the government, state governments, because otherwise the numbers would be fake. So now maybe Daniela wants to talk about the elections.
To add a new characteristic about this, there was this team of journalists getting information from local governments. But when elections are coming up, even the states are hiding information because the governors don't want to, to show that their states, their governments are doing badly. So we are in the dark.
Do you think even now? I mean,
even
do you
now,
feel confident that you know the statistics from Brazil?
No. I think we don't know any statistic, reliable statistic that comes from the government. We don't have any. And that's why I think, for example, elections. Next elections will be in October. Bolsonaro is a candidate. And Lula, the former president who was in power for 8 years, and then he made his successor, Dilma, who was impeached, but she was in power for 6 years. Anyways, Lula is leading the polls. And Bolsonaro, they have a gap of, I think, 14, 16.
It decreased, like 12. 14.
Yeah, and it's getting less, this distance between them. Why? I think because, first, people are reading the polls we should be reading the polls in a different way. And we talked about this last night. People always pay attention in numbers, in party arrangements, this party B with party A, and left and right, when we should pay attention in data and feelings that come from these statistics, these polls. For example, in December, Datafolha, which is the largest poll institute in Brazil, published 2 researches. First, 44% of Brazilians think Brazil will become communist if Lula wins. Communist. We never had that. If you stop someone in the middle of the road and said, please define communism, I doubt I give him a kidney if you get, right.
We never had communism in the country.
No. Second research, 51% of the interviews don't want to see LGBT couples in advertising on TV. It says a lot about the country. Because all this agenda of human rights, the defense of minorities, LGBT rights, women, unfortunately, it's a leftist agenda. Because it's universal, it should be a broader agenda for all parties. But unfortunately, in Brazil, it's not, and in general, around the world, across the world. So I pay attention a lot in this data because it says about what people feel when they got home, when they are at home alone, locked up in the bathroom, because people, for example, polls in Brazil are made by phone usually, more or less.
Datafolha and Ibope, no.
Datafolha, it's not. Yeah, but other institutes do a lot of research by phone, which sometimes is not. It's better because, for example, it's not a shame saying I'm voting for Bolsonaro, but it's not sounds good, depending on your environment. So on the phone you can say, okay, I will vote for him. In person, you can get probably a more reliable answer, but also a shamed one who will, mix up the results. So polls are hard to understand and hard to focus.
Which is worrying, but you sort of also hint or suggest, the enormous disinformation that is going around. We mentioned, because most people don't read, reliable newspapers. It goes on social media. And there's one story that you told me that I have to say, not much in this should make any of us laugh, but this did bring a smile. And it was, I'm just going to say the words, and then I'm going to ask you guys to take it away, because I can't do the story justice. But it involves the phrase, and I don't know where the translator is, but hang in there. It involves the phrase, penis-shaped baby bottles. So, I don't know.
In good Portuguese, mamadeira de piroca.
Yeah, and I'd love to know how it's getting translated in Italian. I was going to go biberona forma di pene, but it's up to debate. So
in a most vulgar way.
Yeah. That's what's really sad. It sounds like a joke.
So explain. It sounds because it's so absurd. It's so absurd. But tell us what it is.
In 2018, we had this humongous wave of disinformation, mainly on WhatsApp. And one of the things that was the most popular piece of disinformation that was going around was a penis-shaped baby bottle saying that the left-wing candidate was going to try to indoctrinate kids at elementary schools to sexualize them and to make them maybe, choose talk about sexuality too soon. And part of that would be the penis-shaped baby bottle. There were pictures, like they actually created a...
And just to paint the picture, it's the teat of the bottle shaped like a...
Yes.
Yeah, so.
And you know what? We have the feeling and the impression sometimes that, it's not for... who would believe in that? My father sent me this picture on my WhatsApp, saying, you know what? These people, they are crazy. Look what they are. My father, I'm a journalist, and we went to, we are in a, I don't know, educated environments, but no, it's not something that is far from us. And this was the first steps of the hate cabinet, because Bolsonaro's sons, one of them is behind these first, ideas of trying to bring and spread disinformation. And it's so similar to QAnon, because they focus on this conspiracy, hidden conspiracy about pedophilia and communism. And
there's also one that was very interesting during COVID, because Bolsonaro did not want people to think that COVID was serious, so he was saying, it's just a cold. So there was a video, and that went viral, and many people believed it, that they were burying coffins with stones inside, that people were not really dying.
But can I just ask a sort of devil's advocate question? With COVID everywhere, ultimately people saw others die around them. In Brazil, there must, I saw the pictures, and I didn't report from there, but on reliable international media. There comes a point where if your neighbors are dying, there's not stones in that coffin. Did Brazil's astronomical death rates have an impact in trying to, show that the Bolsonaro narrative wasn't obviously 100% or even 50%?
Well, at some point, after a few months, he lost a lot of popularity because of that, and because he delayed the vaccine and he was not believing. So in the end, I think people started to realize, right?
But and I will do a criticism about the media in Brazil covering, because I was living in the UK back then during the pandemic. And the difference on how, and look, UK didn't manage, the thing so well. But journalistic speaking, the way you see the pictures of sick people dying in the hospitals and drowning in the dry. This is the image. They are drowning in the dry. Impact you so much. And in Brazil, I don't know why, there is a kind of, oh no, we can't show this
squeamishness.
Yes, so we never, they show the coffins. We see the oxygen bottles arriving at the hospital, but we don't see people dying, which is not a good thing to see, but in times of crisis, it's something that shakes you, you know? You said, oh my God, even if you had a neighbor or your father who had died from COVID, it's like covering climate change, for example. Look at this, it's interesting because every time you see a story about climate change, is a bear trying to get his steel into a small piece of an iceberg, and there's no face, there's no people, or there's like burning trees, or so it's kind of, for me at least, hard to relate with the story. Even if you know how important it is, we need to put faces and life stories to get an effective response from the readers and from people.
I guess it's like the refugee crisis here in Europe, when you had the picture of the little boy in the red shirt, Alan Kurdi, that's people actually realize, well, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, the level of empathy. I mean, I do think some of that is human nature, you know, we need to relate to you know, people that we could empathize, and it's always that, it could be me, it could be my son, it could be... We're coming to nearly the end of the session. I'd like to finish with what we can do to improve it. But just one final, more kind of technical Bolsonaro government. How aware do you think people are of this hate cabinet? I mean, I'm guessing the vast majority of the population probably not, from the level of disinformation you've spoken about, but at other levels. Maybe not journalists, but sort of normal people who are interested, let's put it that way.
Well, there's investigations. The Supreme Court has 2 investigations. The Electoral Court has 1 investigation ongoing. And also, last year, there were Supreme Court rulings that were mentioning, I mean, not by name, but saying, you know, if you do this during the elections, we're gonna annul your candidacy or something. So in a level, something that people used to say in 2018, that doesn't exist. You know, that's only, they used to say, tia do Zap, our aunt from WhatsApp. You know, it's just your aunt on WhatsApp. You know, there's no bots, there's no... So people realize, I think there's an awareness, but restricted, right? I mean, it's always very...
But you know what? The problem is nobody cares, actually. You know, it's something that people are so overwhelmed. And you can imagine the situation in Brazil, because we are living abroad, you know? And even we, being away from, you know, the daily basis turmoil, we feel so, you know, exhausted and touched by everything. So imagine you getting news every day, morning, after, and evening, about some outrageous thing Bolsonaro has done or someone linked to him, and plus COVID, and plus Ukraine, and plus elections, and plus. So it's, I really, literally, all my friends are drinking more or taking like restricted medicines to their mental health. No, it's true, it's a problem, it's a health problem. And we had panels here in this festival about the mental health problem among journalists, because it's something, it's serious.
Absolutely, and working alone for many during the pandemic didn't help. A very final one on Bolsonaro, because of course there's the election coming up. Should he win again, he's got another term with which to influence the judiciary. What impact would that have?
Well, we are all in a complicated situation. I guess many people are going to have to leave the country, like journalists like us. Many journalists are being judicially harassed. There's businessmen. I think it's similar to Turkey in a way, that you have businessmen who are close to the president who go on, and like there's one specific businessman, he's suing 38 journalists. One of them, Daniela's, one of your former reporters, was one of them, for like 2 million. It's like a lot of money. And for now, the Supreme Court, he appointed 2 justices, right? So Supreme Court is still sort of balanced. If he wins re-election, he's going to appoint another 2 justices. So he's going to have the majority of Supreme Court. And what scares us is like, it's what's happening, and what's happening in India, in Turkey, what's probably going to happen in the Philippines. Hungary, when they get reelected, they they end the dismantling of the checks and balances.
And of course, the United States, where a
And the
huge
United
proportion of the,
Exactly.
of the Republican Party does not believe the election result. And I mean, if that happens in the U.S., which we historically see as the mother of democracies, then obviously it's a worry.
And that leads. That's an excellent point. Even if Bolsonaro does not win in Brazil, we may end up with over a huge proportion of the population who thinks that he did win, because he's also doing the same thing as Trump did, saying, oh, the election's going to be rigged, fraudulent, blah, blah. So it's like a no-win.
Yeah, it's already in March, a campaign for undermining the electronic ballot. There is a hashtag called a print vote now, because in Brazil we are many years ahead with this electronic ballot thing, and works perfectly. We never had any problem. It was audited by many international companies, and there's very reliable way to vote. Even because we have it's a huge country, and everything. Vote in Brazil is mandatory, which is a difference as well. So the idea of, and another Bolsonaro son who is a congressman as well, he was in the US during the
January 6th.
Yeah, the Capitol invasion, the January the 6th, and he said back then, oh, they did it wrong. So,
like if it were in Brazil, we would do the right thing, which
Yeah.
is actually consummate a coup d'etat.
So there's a lot of evidences in front of our faces, and this is the most critical point of everything. We feel like what to do, how to react.
I mean, and of course, just to take it back to the original point about the hate cabinet and how it works, a free and strong independent press that isn't intimidated is key to democracies from Brazil to the US to everywhere. So as a final kind of thought, let's look to the future and see how maybe some things within our gift, our power, could be improved. And we spoke for a long time about how, you mentioned, Daniela, that companies don't know what to do, that you call your legal office and it's like, and I know this also in a very, very different way, much safer way in the UK of, other colleagues that have been intimidated and harassed, and you call the press office, I'm not going to name names, but of the biggest networks in the world. And it's like, their answer is, yeah, just don't reply. And I'm not sure, and I know that, you also don't know. Yeah, sure, but in every case, if someone starts publishing your address, well, you just don't reply. So, focusing on what could we do, or crucially, at least for those of us who have the protection of working for a big company, what could a big company do? If you had the head of, either the main broadcasters or whatever, what would you have wanted to see in place when you made that call?
I think news companies should hire people who are experts in digital first, to respond immediately and with impact, and be prepared before something happens. It's like an army. You have to have your army ready for the combat, because a war happens there's no a date, a calendar. Okay, this war will start on January the 1st, probably, but no, in general. So I think my point is, companies are doing their job in a way they could be doing better.
Yeah, they should have, I agree with Daniela, they should have digital security experts helping all of us. How should I deal with this? What do I do with this person who's, when should I report to the police? Because sometimes that's the point, right? And also, there has to be an institutional response, a backing from the media outlet. You know, maybe you're not personally going to respond, and I think this is really counterproductive because you're just going to amplify the stuff. But you need to have the backing of your company. You need to have your company saying, see, this is not normal. This is not acceptable.
Because also a lot of the companies will have accounts with millions and millions of followers. So, I mean, yes, there's an organized army on one hand, but, you know, we're not without digital weapons, if you will, when you mobilize the journal. I mean, I just find there's so much. I just think that there should be someone that goes through your mentions. I don't know why I always think Twitter is the, I don't know, at least I think that's kind of like a bit of a battleground. I just think that someone in the press office should go through your mentions. There is no way that you should go through your own mentions because it's just hurtful, but someone should monitor it to see if you are getting doxxed, if things have been published, if there's a picture of your house or, you know, or your children or whatever. You know, there's so much I don't know, like what's the difference between retweeting or some people do a screen grab and then, you know, there's a lot of things to do with the algorithm and yeah, I mean, like you, I just don't think anybody knows in press offices.
Yeah, and I think my final point would be, we don't have artificial intelligence doing journalism yet. Journalism is made by people, and companies need to invest to protect their people. Not instead of spending so much money in trying to, you know, being, so I don't know, design thinking on whatever thing, invest on your people because we do the job.
But you guys both work sort of at, or you've had fellowships at some of the main universities, both in the US and the UK. Do you hear that conversation? Is it happening at any level, in any country?
Yes, I've had
There's a growing awareness that, you know, this is really a high burden on journalists, that it makes us think twice, and I'm sure everybody else, like, okay, so am I going to publish this story? What's going to happen to me? So at least there's an awareness. Before, people were just like, oh, okay, that's, you know, internet people. Just, it's going to go away. Just, you know, you go to sleep, tomorrow it's going to go away. So there's more of an awareness, at least. I'm not sure how that translates into action.
Rightly or wrongly, and you may not want to be, but you're both examples for a lot of journalists of, you know, of courage for facing what you faced and continuing to do your work. You may not want to be, but you are. And, you know, I mean, I certainly have huge admiration for you both. What advice would you give to a young journalist, especially, I guess, a young female journalist in Brazil who wants to do, you know, who wants to work as a serious journalist, touching the serious stories? What would your honest advice be?
Don't be biased. Don't be an activist. Be impartial and speak out. If something happens to you, don't banalize bad words about you.
I think this is still the best job in the world. So I would tell you, you know, don't get intimidated. Just keep on doing your job the best we can, trying to be fair. Don't get intimidated because it's still the best job in the world.
It is.
Thank you.
Patricia Campos Mello, Daniela Pinheiro, thank you so much, ladies. It's been a great chat. It's been great getting to know you as well. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you soon.